From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making an impact across the world. We begin in Brazil, where security has been ramped up for the two-day G20 summit. The government has deployed soldiers, armored vehicles, and Navy ships to guard the Bayside Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro. Air traffic, including the use of drones, has been restricted near the venue. Authorities are taking no chances after a failed bomb attack on Brazil's Supreme Court in the capital, Brasilia, on Wednesday. Several world leaders have arrived in Rio for the summit, which will be guarded by at least 26,000 security personnel. From the climate crisis to regional wars, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls on G20 leaders to use their power of leverage to tackle these global issues. Guterres says 2024 will likely be the hottest year in history, and the drought in the Amazon and floods in southern Brazil are just some of the impacts of global warming. Guterres also stresses the need for peace, with conflicts escalating in Ukraine, Gaza, and Sudan.
An immediate ceasefire, the immediate release of all hostages, and the beginning of an irreversible process towards a two-state solution. Peace in Lebanon, with a ceasefire and meaningful steps towards implementing Security Council resolutions in full. Peace in Ukraine by following the UN Charter, UN resolutions, and international law. Peace in Sudan by leaders leaning on the warring parties to end the horrific violence and desperate humanitarian crisis being unleashed on civilians. Everywhere, peace requires actions grounded in the values of the UN Charter, the rule of law, and the principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states.
Heading to Washington now, as the Biden administration will allow Ukraine to use U.S.-provided weapons to strike deep into Russian territory. That's according to three sources familiar with the matter. For months, Ukraine has asked the U.S. permission to use U.S. missiles. And while the White House has so far declined to comment, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued this statement.
Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions. But strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will. Glory to Ukraine.
The move comes following Russia's deployment of North Korean ground troops to augment its forces, a development that has caused alarm in Washington and Kyiv. It's still unclear if U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will reverse Biden's decision when he takes office. Trump has long criticized the scale of U.S. financial and military support to Ukraine and has vowed to end the war quickly without explaining how. UN Chief Antonio Guterres, meanwhile, calls for de-escalation of the war in Ukraine. His call comes amid reports U.S. President Joe Biden has allowed Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to strike deep into Russia.
Firstly, our position has been very clear regarding the need to avoid a permanent escalation of the Ukraine war. We want peace, but we want peace with justice, in line with the resolutions of the General Assembly, with the Charter of the United Nations, and with international law.
On to the war in Gaza. Dozens of Palestinians were reported killed or injured in an Israeli strike in northern Gaza. The Palestinian Civil Emergency says the strike hit a residential building. Around 70 people were inside. The Israeli military confirmed it attacked several of what it calls terrorist targets in the area, with everything possible done to avoid civilian harm. Gaza's health ministry says nearly 44,000 have died since the war erupted in October last year. On another front, Israel launches fresh strikes in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says they targeted buildings housing Hezbollah munitions and underground installations. Among those hit by the strikes was the coastal city of Tyre, where residents witnessed extensive destruction. There, buildings were reduced to ruins, vehicles were wrecked, and personal belongings were left scattered and destroyed.
The city of Tyre was subjected to a series of additional strikes yesterday, bringing the cumulative number of strikes on the city to more than 30 between jets and drones. These strikes targeted residential buildings and people's financial belongings. And of course, on the broader scale of the Tyre district, yesterday, Tyre and its surroundings were subjected to approximately 14 strikes. Israel is using all their military power on the civilians. There is nothing here in the city. It's a safe city, a touristic city, and historical city.
Up next on World Newsfeed, fans greet U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and his team at the Ultimate Fighting Championship heavyweight bout at New York's Madison Square Garden. Stay with us here on BNC. And we're back. You're still watching World Newsfeed. Typhoon Pepito sweeps across Luzon, battering the region with heavy rain and strong winds. This video released by the mayor of Jomalig in Quezon Province shows Pepito lashing at trees with gusts of up to 275 kilometers per hour. Footage from the Coast Guard, meanwhile, shows homes being evacuated and workers clearing roads of fallen branches in Aurora. Known internationally as Manila, Pepito is the sixth tropical cyclone to hit the Philippines in a month. More than 1 million people have been affected by the multiple storms.
Nag-order po na preemptive evacuation. Gawa po ng...
A preemptive evacuation was ordered based on the projected possible damages of Typhoon Pepito. The dangers and threats that we see regarding the areas that are assigned to us, particularly Parola area in neighborhood 275 and other areas in the coastal side of Manila, are storm surges, sudden rise of water levels, and we also expect strong winds.
We evacuated because every time there is a typhoon, the water rises in the nearby river. We have children with us and we are scared. That is why we evacuated.
Heading to India now, where air quality in the capital city remains hazardous. Drone footage shows a thick layer of toxic haze blanketing New Delhi over the weekend. Some of India's iconic landmarks, including the India Gate War Memorial, were obscured by the dense smog as locals jogged and walked in the area.
I think it is very important to use masks. We should use masks when we are going out for morning walks, and we should leave our homes only when it is extremely important. It would be better to not go out at all because the pollution is extremely bad at the moment and it is causing a lot of health problems.
The
government should take steps to spread awareness among people. They should promote using public transport over private vehicles, proper waste management, and mainly focus on spreading awareness among as many people as possible so they can take it as their duty to contribute less to pollution.
Before flying to Brazil for the G20 summit, Joe Biden held what's likely his final meeting as U.S. president with China's Xi Jinping in Peru. The two leaders met for about 2 hours on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Lima. Biden and Xi acknowledged their differences but emphasized the need to maintain U.S. and China ties. Xi also vows to work with the incoming administration of Donald Trump.
China-U.S. relations have gone through ups and downs, but under the joint stewardship, the two sides have also been engaged in fruitful dialogue and cooperation, and the relationship has been kept stable on the whole. When the two countries treat each other as partners and friends, seek common ground while shelving differences and help each other succeed, our relationship would make considerable progress. But if they take each other as rival or adversary, pursue vicious competition and seek to hurt each other, we would roil the relationship or even set it back.
We haven't always agreed, but our conversations have always been candid and always been frank. We have never kidded one another. We've been level with one another. I think that's vital. These conversations prevent miscalculations, and they ensure the competition between our two countries will not veer into conflict. Be competition, not conflict. That's our responsibility to our people, and as you indicated, to the people around the world. We are the most important alliance or most important relationship in the entire world. And how we get along together is going to impact the rest of the world. And so, our two countries cannot let any of this competition veer into conflict.
The talks came 2 months before Trump assumes office. The president-elect has threatened to slap tariffs of up to 60% on U.S. imports of Chinese goods as part of his protectionist trade policies. Joe Biden flagging the dangers of global warming as he becomes the first sitting U.S. president to visit the Amazon rainforest. Biden also toured the Museum of the Amazon, where he met with indigenous leaders who want to protect the rainforest. Biden says he will leave the next American president with a strong climate policy to build from if they choose to do so. But this may be on thin ice, as President-elect Donald Trump has called climate change a hoax.
We all know there's much more we can do and must do at home and abroad. That's why today I issued an official proclamation to support the conservation of nature around the world. Because the fight to protect our planet is literally a fight for humanity, for generations to come. It may be the only existential threat to all our nations that exist.
As Biden visited the Amazon rainforest, Trump watched the Ultimate Fighting Championship heavyweight bout at New York's Madison Square Garden. Trump entered the arena shortly before the start of the main card, accompanied by UFC boss Dana White, a prominent backer during the campaign. Several of Trump's allies were also in attendance, including tech billionaire Elon Musk and Trump's pick for Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. After waving to the chanting crowd, Trump was warmly greeted by UFC broadcast analyst Joe Rogan, who has also endorsed the Republican. Still in the UFC, John Bones Jones remains the heavyweight champion after defeating Stipe Miocic in a third-round technical knockout. Jones used a spinning body kick to finish off his opponent. Miocic eventually announced his retirement from MMA after the fight. Coming up, she may not have made it to the top 12, but Miss Universe Philippines 2024 Chelsea Manalo did not go home empty-handed. Watching World Newsfeed only here on BNC. Welcome back to World Newsfeed. She may have missed the top 12, but Miss Universe Philippines 2024 Chelsea Manalo is not going home empty-handed. Manalo was named Miss Universe Asia 2024, one of 4 continental queens in this year's Miss Universe pageant. The others are Nigeria for Africa and Oceania, Finland for Europe and Middle East, and Peru for the Americas. Denmark took this year's title, besting 124 other candidates during the 3-hour pageant held in Mexico on Sunday.
Hello, maraming Maraming salamat. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. We are making history as Miss Universe Asia.
The last supermoon of the 2024 dazzles the skies of Venezuela. In Caracas, people gathered at lookouts to enjoy the so-called beaver moon and capture the moment on camera. All full moons in November are called beaver moons. They are believed to be named that way to reflect the increased activities of beavers around that time of the year.
For us, Caracas is special. The moon is special and brings a lot of emotions. We are here admiring it and enjoying it. Connecting with nature is always very special.
Dinosaurs, primitive birds, and giant sea creatures roaring back to life in Paris. France's National Museum of Natural History illuminating the animals into giant replicas to highlight the explosion of life 200 million years ago. The sculptures are designed in collaboration with scientists from the Museum of Natural History, while the lights are produced by China Light Festival. The light show is open until January 19 next year.
This actually, we need these kind of things to make us like feel calm, and let's be sure, let's be happy, and spend a good time like this with our family, a good one, good people to us.
Still in Paris, the skeleton of a 70-feet-long dinosaur fetches more than $6 million at an auction over the weekend. An anonymous collector snapped up the vegetarian Apatosaurus, which was dug up in Wyoming in the United States in 2018. The skeleton of the giant herbivore is made up of 75 to 80% of the original bones and is roughly 150 million years old. The buyers pledged to allow it to be displayed in a museum. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us again tomorrow when we bring you the world in 30 minutes, only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money comes next. Keep it here on BNC.